A Chinese startup just did something that sent shockwaves through Silicon Valley. They built an AI model that rivals OpenAI's best work. But here's what nobody saw coming. They did it for a fraction of the cost, released it for free, and triggered a $1 trillion stock market meltdown in the process. This is the story of DeepSeek, and it changes everything we thought we knew about the AI race. January 20th, 2025. While most of the tech world was focused on the usual players, a company called DeepSeek quietly released their R1 model. Within hours, it rocketed to #1 on Apple's App Store. The performance? Reportedly on par with OpenAI's $200 per month offering. The price? Completely free. Wall Street panicked. Nvidia lost nearly $600 billion in market cap, not over weeks or months, in a single day. Other chip stocks followed suit, dragging down the entire tech sector. The message was clear. Everything Silicon Valley had been claiming about AI development costs might be wrong. But let's rewind. Who is DeepSeek, and how did they pull this off? The company emerged from a hedge fund called High Flyer, founded by a 40-year-old Chinese entrepreneur named Liang Wenfeng. Unlike the flashy CEOs dominating Western tech, Liang stayed almost completely out of the spotlight. There's basically one photo of him in circulation. While Sam Altman was doing media tours and Elon Musk was tweeting about AI, Liang was quietly building. His background wasn't traditional Silicon Valley material. He studied electrical engineering and computer vision, then dove into finance. Highflyer used AI to predict market trends, and it worked. The fund grew to manage $8 billion in assets. Then Liang made an unexpected pivot. In 2023, he announced that Highflyer would shift focus toward artificial general intelligence. People thought he'd lost his mind. A GI isn't something you tackle as a side project. It's the domain of tech giants with unlimited budgets. But Liang saw an opportunity where others saw impossibility. He started buying thousands of NVIDIA GPUs. This was right before the Biden administration began restricting AI hardware exports to China. When those restrictions hit, most assumed Chinese AI development would stall. Instead, Liang got creative. Here's where things get interesting. DeepSeek didn't just build a cheaper version of existing models. They fundamentally rethought the approach. While OpenAI's GPT-4 tries to be everything at once, DeepSeek uses something called mixture of experts architecture. Think of it this way. GPT-4 is like having one massive brain handle every question. DeepSeek is more like a university with specialized departments. When you ask a math question, it routes to the math experts. Only that part of the network activates. The rest stays dormant, saving massive amounts of computing power. The efficiency gains are staggering. DeepSeek runs on older NVIDIA chips that Liang stockpiled before the export bans. They trained the model using reinforcement learning, meaning no human supervision. The AI essentially taught itself, and they claim it cost under $6 million to develop. That number caused immediate skepticism. Anthropic's CEO had predicted future models would cost $100 billion to train. Meta announced plans to spend $6.5 billion on AI. So, how did a Chinese startup do it for less than the cost of a small office building? The answer involves some clever engineering and possibly some creative accounting. DeepSeek's own paper admits the $6 million figure only covers the official training run. It doesn't include prior research, failed experiments, or architecture development. Still, even if the real number is 10 times higher, it's a rounding error compared to what American companies are spending. OpenAI wasn't amused. They told the Financial Times they have evidence DeepSeek used ChatGPT outputs to train their model. Last year, they blocked API accounts they believed belonged to DeepSeek, suspecting intellectual property theft. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. OpenAI, a company that scraped the entire internet for training data, was now crying foul about others using their outputs. But there's something deeper happening here. DeepSeek made their model completely open source. Anyone can download it, modify it, use it commercially. No restrictions. This is the opposite of OpenAI's approach, which is increasingly closed and proprietary despite the name. Why give it away? Liang has been surprisingly candid about his philosophy. He believes China has spent too long copying Western innovations instead of creating their own. He wants to change that. Making DeepSeek open source isn't just generous, it's strategic. It attracts talent, accelerates development, and levels the playing field against companies with deeper pockets. The release of R1 forced immediate responses. Sam Altman announced ChatGPT's mini model would now be free. Mark Zuckerberg's team went into crisis mode internally. Chinese tech giants like ByteDance and Alibaba slashed their AI pricing to compete. Even DeepSeek's own success caught them off guard. Their servers got hammered so hard they had to temporarily limit new registrations. The technical achievement is impressive, but the geopolitical implications are what really matter. Washington has spent years trying to contain China's AI development through chip export controls. DeepSeek just proved those restrictions might be counterproductive. You can't simply cut off access to hardware and expect innovation to stop. Necessity breeds creativity, reads. The White House announced they're investigating national security implications. Congress started asking questions. The entire strategy of technological containment suddenly looks naive. China isn't just catching up. In some ways, they're leapfrogging. But let's zoom out for a second. Is DeepSeek actually as good as the hype suggests? The answer is complicated. On standard benchmarks, it performs comparably to ChatGPT and Claude. For coding, mathematics, and reasoning tasks, it holds its own. Users flooding to the app seem genuinely impressed. Yet, there are limitations. Ask it about Tiananmen Square or Taiwan independence, and you'll get carefully worded non-answers. It's aligned with Beijing's censorship requirements. The reasoning it shows before answering is transparent, which is novel. But that reasoning follows acceptable political boundaries. Some developers have already found ways around this. A US startup called Oplexity announced they're running an uncensored version on their platform. Because it's open source, anyone can modify the guardrails. This creates its own complications. OpenAI keeps their models closed partly to prevent misuse. DeepSeek's approach means they have zero control over how people deploy their technology. The efficiency story also deserves scrutiny. Yes, DeepSeek runs on less hardware, but they're not doing magic. The mixture of experts' architecture is clever, not revolutionary. Google has used similar techniques. The real innovation is making it work well with limited resources. That's engineering excellence, not a fundamental breakthrough. What's fascinating is how this challenges assumptions about AI development. The prevailing narrative said you need massive data centers, cutting-edge chips, and billions in funding. DeepSeek didn't disprove that exactly. They showed there's more than one path forward. Efficiency matters as much as raw power. This has huge implications for the industry. If AI models become commoditized, where does that leave companies spending hundreds of billions on infrastructure? Maybe the future isn't building the most powerful model. Maybe it's building the best applications on top of good enough models. Apple's recent deal with Google hints at this. Why spend a fortune developing your own AI when you can license someone else's? Samsung did the same thing, building Galaxy AI on top of Gemini. The smartphone analogy works here. Most phone makers don't design their own processors anymore. They use Qualcomm or MediaTek chips. Could AI models follow the same pattern? That would completely upend current investment strategies. Nvidia's stock dropped $600 billion in market value on DeepSeek Day. Investors suddenly questioned whether the AI infrastructure build-out was overblown. If you can achieve comparable results with a fraction of the hardware, why are we building trillion-dollar data centers? The answer might be that we're still in the experimental phase. Nobody knows which approach will dominate long-term. Raw power versus efficiency, closed versus open source, centralized versus distributed. These questions remain unsettled. What we do know is that competition just intensified dramatically. The AI race is no longer America versus everyone else. It's a genuine multiplayer competition. That's probably healthy. Monopolies rarely produce the best outcomes, but it also creates new tensions. Technology and geopolitics are now inseparable. Liang himself has stayed mostly silent through all of this. He gave a rare interview where he talked about China needing to transition from copying to innovating. He wants Chinese companies to contribute rather than just benefit from Western technology. DeepSeek is his attempt to prove it's possible. Whether he succeeds long-term depends on factors beyond just technical capability. Can DeepSeek maintain its edge as American companies respond? Will Chinese government involvement help or hinder development? Can open source truly compete with well-funded closed systems? The next few years will answer those questions. What's clear now is that the assumptions everyone held just months ago no longer apply. The AI landscape shifted overnight. Smaller teams with limited resources can compete with tech giants. Efficiency might matter more than scale. Open source could challenge proprietary models. And perhaps most importantly, technological dominance isn't guaranteed to any single country or company. The race is on and the finish line keeps moving. DeepSeek proved that innovation doesn't require unlimited budgets or the latest hardware. Sometimes it just takes a different approach and the willingness to challenge conventional wisdom. Whether this marks a genuine shift in the AI race or just a temporary disruption remains to be seen. What's undeniable is that the rules just changed. The companies spending hundreds of billions better have a good answer for why efficiency suddenly doesn't matter. And the governments trying to contain AI development through export controls just learned those strategies might backfire spectacularly. Yang Wenfeng went from running a hedge fund to potentially reshaping the entire AI industry. Not a bad for someone most people had never heard of 6 months ago. The question now isn't whether China can compete in AI. It's whether anyone can afford not to rethink their entire strategy.